The Rio Grande is dead. The fourth longest river in North America, a river that has been flowing for millions of years, just ran completely dry. Not for a mile, not for 10 miles, for more than 50 miles of cracked, lifeless riverbed baking under the desert sun. And the reservoir that was built to save it, New Mexico's largest, is sitting at just 3%. Never seen lows. A number that has water scientists in absolute panic. Picture entire towns watching their crops die in the fields. Farmers who have worked the same land for 4 generations, staring at empty dirt where their harvest should be. 3 million people, 6 states, 2 nations, all depending on a single river that is vanishing right in front of their eyes. But here is what nobody is telling you. This is not a drought. Scientists have a different word for what is happening to the American Southwest, and that word means the crisis you are looking at right now may not be temporary. It may be permanent. The backup plan, a tunnel drilled straight through the Continental Divide, just failed too. The treaties protecting everyone's water were written for a river that no longer exists. A river that carved canyons through solid rock. A river that survived ice ages and volcanic eruptions. A river that shaped the entire geography of the American Southwest. Is finally running out of water. So what happens to 3 million people when the river they depend on is finally gone? And are we watching the slow death of the American Southwest, or the start of a water war that no treaty on Earth can stop? Most people picture the Rio Grande as a line on a map, a border, the place where the United States ends and Mexico begins. And yes, it forms the entire 1,254-mile southern boundary of Texas, one of the most significant international borders in the Western Hemisphere. But that is not what makes this river matter. What makes the Rio Grande matter is what it carries. Water. Life-sustaining, irreplaceable, mathematically finite water. And for millions of people across 6 states and 2 nations, it is the only major river they have. The river begins high in the San Juan Mountains of Colorado, more than 12,000 feet above sea level. Every spring, snow melts from those frozen peaks and feeds the river below. That snowmelt becomes the drinking water for Albuquerque, the largest city in New Mexico, home to 600,000 people. It becomes the irrigation water that grows the cotton, the pecans, the green chile, and the onions that define the agricultural identity of the entire region. It flows south into Texas, crosses the border into Mexico, and feeds communities on the other side that have been legally promised their share since 1944. Colorado, New Mexico, Texas, and 4 Mexican states, Chihuahua, Coahuila, Nuevo León, and Tamaulipas, all depend on this single river. For every one of them, there is no alternative. No other major river, no backup. This is it. Think about that for a moment. 3 million people on the American side. Another 1.5 million across the border in Ciudad Juarez. Farms that have fed the American Southwest for over a century. Cities that grew from nothing into thriving population centers. All of them, every single one, depending on water from one river that is now disappearing faster than anyone in power wants to admit. The Rio Grande is not just a river. It is the artery that keeps the entire American Southwest alive. And right now, that artery is collapsing. Slowly, quietly, and in a way that the law was never designed to handle. At the center of the entire system sits one structure that was supposed to guarantee it all would work. Elephant Butte Reservoir, about 125 miles south of Albuquerque. When it was built from 1911 to 1916, it was the largest man-made reservoir in the world, the largest on the entire planet. The scale of the engineering was almost unbelievable for its time. Workers diverted the entire Rio Grande out of its natural channel. They excavated through solid rock. They erected a concrete gravity dam standing 301 feet tall, a wall of concrete so massive it could hold back an ocean of water. The reservoir it created stretched 40 miles behind the dam and held up to 2.19 million acre-feet of water at full capacity. To picture what that actually means, 1 acre-foot is enough to cover an entire football field with a foot of water. At full capacity, Elephant Butte held enough water to bury the entire island of Manhattan under more than 60 feet of liquid. 60 feet, above the rooftops of skyscrapers. That was the scale of the promise. And the promise was simple. Store the water in the wet years, release it slowly in the dry ones, make the desert bloom. For decades, it worked exactly as the engineers had imagined. Farmers planted crops with confidence. Cities grew without fear. Populations across the Southwest expanded year after year. Every spring, the snowpack melted, the Rio Grande rose, and Elephant Butte filled back up. Not always to the brim, but enough. Always enough for everyone to keep believing the system was sound. Today, that same reservoir is sitting at 3% capacity. 3% of the largest man-made reservoir ever built at the time of its completion. The water is gone. The promise the engineers made over a century ago has quietly broken. And the river it was built to tame, the river that was supposed to feed it forever, has started to disappear. The structure is still standing, but the system around it is collapsing in real time. The trouble did not arrive all at once. It crept in slowly, the way a bank account drains when you are spending just a little more than you are earning every single month. Easy to ignore, easy to explain away, until the balance is almost zero. Through the 1970s and 1980s, the system held. Snowpack built through winter, melted in spring, and the Rio Grande would rise. Elephant Butte would refill, not always to the brim, but enough to meet the demands of farms, cities, and the international treaty obligations waiting downstream. The desert was blooming exactly as the engineers had promised. Then the 1990s arrived, and the refills started coming up short. Some years, the snowpack was lighter than expected. Other years, upstream users pulled more water than anticipated. The reservoir's annual recovery never quite reached where it needed to be. A slow, quiet draining that was easy to dismiss as a bad year. And then another bad year. And then a pattern that nobody wanted to officially call a pattern. By 2013, Elephant Butte had dropped to roughly 3% of its capacity for the first time in modern memory. Scientists called it alarming. Engineers scrambled. Emergency water managers held meetings. Then the rains came. Not enough to be normal, but enough to pull the crisis off the front page. The reservoir crept back up. The headlines stopped. Crisis averted. Except it was not averted. It was postponed. And while everyone exhaled, nobody changed the math. The amount of water being legally promised to farms, cities, and international agreements was significantly more than the river was reliably delivering. The gap was widening every single year. By the end of 2024, Elephant Butte was below 3% again. But this time, there were no rains coming. And the backup system, the San Juan Chama project, a tunnel drilled straight through the Continental Divide, hit a record low allocation in 2025. The primary system was failing. The emergency reserve was failing. The backup plan needed a backup plan. There wasn't one. Picture yourself standing on the banks of the Rio Grande in the summer of 2024, not near the headwaters in Colorado, not at the Texas border crossing, somewhere in the middle, between Albuquerque and Elephant Butte, in the stretch of river that is supposed to be the beating heart of New Mexico's water system. You are expecting to see water. What you see instead is dirt. Dry, cracked, gray-white riverbed baking in the high desert sun. Cottonwood trees standing brown and dead on the banks. Tall trees that only grow near permanent water, rising above a channel that contains absolutely nothing. No current, no trickle, no reflection of the sky. Just cracked mud where a river used to be. 50 miles. The Rio Grande ran completely dry for more than 50 miles. Not low, not shallow, gone. And this is not something that is supposed to happen to a river of this size. The Rio Grande has been flowing for millions of years. It carved through the volcanic rock of New Mexico's high desert. It cut the Rio Grande Gorge, a canyon 800 feet deep through solid basalt north of Taos. It shaped the entire geography of the American Southwest. Last summer, it stopped. The science behind why is not complicated. Roughly 70% of the Rio Grande's annual flow comes from snowmelt in the Colorado Rockies and the mountains of northern New Mexico. When winters run warm and dry, the snowpack is thin. When spring arrives early, that snow melts too fast. Too much of it evaporates before it ever reaches the river. What should become July water becomes March vapor, gone into the atmosphere before anyone can capture it. Now layer on the legal obligations. More than 1.5 million acres of farmland hold legal rights to pull water from this river. Add Albuquerque, El Paso, Las Cruces. Add Mexico's guaranteed share. In 2025, the Bureau of Reclamation cut some irrigation districts to 0. Not reduced. 0. Fields farmed by the same families for 4 generations, sitting empty. To understand how 3 million people ended up legally dependent on a river that can no longer support them, you have to go back more than a century. Back to a time when Americans were building the Panama Canal, damming rivers across the continent, and operating with the absolute confidence that engineering could solve anything nature threw at them. The Rio Grande was next in line to be tamed. In 1944, the United States signed a treaty with Mexico, promising 60,000 acre-feet of Rio Grande water every single year. Not when the river was high, not when conditions allowed, every year, no matter what the river actually delivered that season. 2 years earlier, the legal framework for dividing the river between American states had already taken shape in the Rio Grande Compact of 1938, which formally divided every drop of this river between Colorado, New Mexico, and Texas before the water had even finished falling from the mountains. This is the original sin of the Rio Grande crisis. The agreements made sense at the time, at least on paper, but they were written during unusually wet decades that turned out to be far above the long-term historical average. The Colorado River Compact of 1922 made the exact same catastrophic mistake to that river simultaneously. Nobody built in a margin for prolonged drought. Nobody built in a margin for explosive population growth. And absolutely nobody built in a margin for a climate that would shift the entire baseline of what this river could produce. The people writing those agreements were not negligent. They were working with the data they had. The problem is that the data was wrong, and nobody ever went back to correct the promises built on top of it. Today, the Rio Grande Basin holds more than 6 million people on the American side alone. Ciudad Juarez adds another 1.5 million. In 2023, New Mexico was ordered to pay Texas $144 million to settle a lawsuit over water it had failed to deliver. The crisis is already showing its teeth. There is a town in southern New Mexico called Hatch, population about 1,700 people. Quiet, small, and by almost any measure, entirely unremarkable. Except for one thing. If you have ever eaten green chile anywhere in the United States, on a burger, in a stew, roasted and peeled and laid over eggs on a Sunday morning, there is a very good chance it came from the Hatch Valley. This small stretch of Rio Grande floodplain north of El Paso grows more green chile per acre than anywhere else on Earth. The volcanic soil, the long growing season, the high desert sun. It is a combination that farmers elsewhere have spent decades trying to replicate and have never quite managed. Every single acre of it runs on Rio Grande water, delivered through the Elephant Butte Irrigation District, one of the oldest water management systems in the American West. In 2024, that district received a water allocation roughly half of what a normal year should deliver. Farmers faced a brutal arithmetic. Plant half your fields and hope, or plant nothing and wait. Many chose to let their fields go, standing empty in the summer heat, while the investment of a lifetime sat idle. The farm equipment did not run. The seasonal workers did not come. The restaurants, the gas stations, the hardware stores that depend on a functioning agricultural economy watched their revenues collapse. One fourth-generation Chile farmer in the Hatch Valley put it simply: "We didn't lose a bad year. We lost everything we planted, everything we planned, and we still don't know what next year looks like." And Hatch is not alone. Albuquerque is navigating its own version of the same crisis. The city invested heavily in aquifer storage systems, pumping water underground during wet years to pull back up in dry ones. Smart engineering, forward-thinking management. But that system depends on there being wet years. And in 2025, the Rio Grande riverbed running through the middle of New Mexico's largest city has been dry since spring. Scientists have a word for what is happening in the American Southwest that matters more than the word drought. That word is aridification. And the difference between those two words is the difference between a bad season and a permanently altered world. Drought is temporary. Drought means there is a dry period, and eventually the rains return, the aquifers refill, and the reservoirs climb back toward normal. Drought is a deviation from the baseline. Aridification is a change in the baseline itself. The new normal is drier, and on the timescale of human civilization, that change is effectively permanent. This is not a cycle the Rio Grande Basin is moving through. This is the new condition it is moving into. The basin has warmed by approximately 2 degrees Fahrenheit over the past century. That might not sound like much, but in a desert ecosystem already operating at the absolute outer edge of what agriculture, cities, and human settlement can survive, 2 degrees reshapes everything. Higher temperatures mean more evaporation from the river surface, from the soil, from the leaves of every plant the river supports. The snowpack melts earlier. The water that should arrive in July disappears in March, not stolen, not mismanaged, evaporated before anyone had a chance to use it. A study of the Rio Grande's long-term flow found that the river's natural volume, independent of any human withdrawal, has declined by more than 25% since 1980. 1/4 of the river's natural water gone, consumed by a warmer atmosphere. Meanwhile, human demand has not declined by 25%. In many years, it has increased. The Bureau of Reclamation has run climate models projecting Elephant Butte's future through 2050. Under the most likely scenario, the reservoir could reach functionally empty within 15 to 20 years. Empty. A hole in the New Mexico desert that used to hold water and no longer does. Add in Mexico's struggle to meet its own treaty obligations under the 1944 agreement, and a slow-motion conflict is already underway. Here is where the story stands right now. Elephant Butte Reservoir is at 3% capacity. The Rio Grande ran dry for more than 50 miles in 2024. The backup water system is at record low allocation. The agriculture that has fed the American Southwest for a century is being forced off the land by the math of water that is no longer there. And the legal agreements that were supposed to guarantee everyone's share were written for a river that no longer exists. There are people working on this. Engineers in Albuquerque have built one of the most sophisticated urban water recycling systems in the country, treating municipal wastewater and injecting it back into the aquifer for later use. Farmers in the Hatch Valley are experimenting with drip irrigation systems that use 40% less water than traditional flood irrigation. Water managers are attempting to renegotiate compact terms that reflect the reality of a warming basin, rather than the optimism of 1938. These things are real, they matter, but they are not enough to close the gap between what the Rio Grande can currently deliver and what 3 million people have been promised. The honest answer water scientists will give you is that some communities will survive through painful adaptation. Others will not. The small farming towns, the indigenous communities, the neighborhoods at the end of the distribution lines will be the first to go without. The river is still there, barely, and right now, we have not decided whether we are going to save it.